Welcome, dear listener, to Wishcrafting. My name is Wish Amaya, and I am so happy to have you with me today as we are diving into one of the most, or maybe arguably the most, famous story of all time, and that is King Arthur. And you might be thinking, wow, that is a big claim. And you're right, it is a big claim. But there have been so many books, films, TV shows, anything and everything in between made, retelling over and over and over this very story. And it's even bigger of a story and bigger of a deal because this story is a living tradition of land, story, and mystery alive and well in Wales. And what does that mean exactly? A living tradition. Well, that means that the folks in that area still believe these tales, still work with actively these stories, these tales, these figures that you will meet in their day-to-day lives. There are roads named after them, there are places named after them, rivers, schools, children, and so much more. King Arthur's name is alive and well in Wales, the last stronghold of this story, and is a place I can't wait to go explore because this story has had a chokehold on my imagination since I was a very little girl. And as we explore this story, with today being episode 1, and us exploring each month a little further into this myth, you'll start to see why exactly this story is so damn fascinating. It's got everything you could possibly want. Action, intrigue, magic, and it's all so epic. And with that, let's jump right in to episode 1 of this King Arthur series and explore the Welsh countryside as we dive into who is King Arthur anyway? In the heart of Wales, under an ancient oak and a sky dusted with stars, we gather around the warmth of a small fire. Misty wind swirls low over the grass, carrying the scent of rain and history. Tonight, as the quiet harp of imagination begins to play in the back of your mind, we're going to venture into one of the greatest legends ever told. Who is King Arthur? Well, most of us know a King Arthur, or we think we do. Perhaps you can picture him, a young boy pulling a sword from an anvil in a churchyard, proving his right to be king. And that sword, maybe you recall its name, Excalibur, shines bright as he becomes the chosen monarch. Or maybe you can imagine his court, the grand castle of Camelot, filled with brave knights seated at a round table so that none is above another. Maybe you see Queen Guinevere, beautiful and noble, or Merlin, the wise enchanter, guiding Arthur with a mystical counsel. Arthur's reign is glorious, a golden age of chivalry, justice, and unity in the land. But then comes the shadow of betrayal. Sir Lancelot, Arthur's dearest friend and companion, falls into a forbidden love with Queen Guinevere. Their secret passion cracks the fellowship of the Round Table. At the same time, Arthur's own kin, his son, or sometimes nephew, sometimes both, Mordred, turns against him. The battlefield echoes of their final confrontation, steel against steel at Camlan. And there, Arthur slays Mordred, but receives a mortal wound. In the aftermath, rain begins to fall on the bloodied field, and only ghostly battle echoes remain. Then Arthur is carried away into the mist-shrouded Isle of Avalon. Some say Avalon is a mystical paradise where his wounds will heal, where he will slumber until a time of great need, when he will wake, fully healed, and return again. That's the tale as many would hear it. Sword and stone, a noble court, love and betrayal, and the final journey to Avalon. It's a story of rise and fall, of hope and tragedy, and it feels ancient and eternal, and somehow still brand new. But how much of this story is truly old, and how much of it was woven over time to fill in the gaps? To answer the question of who is King Arthur, we have to travel a little further back, through the mists of time, through the layers of story, and find the roots of Arthur's legend in Wales. Now, let us peel back the gilded curtain of medieval romance and step into the dark 5th and 6th century Britain. The Romans have abandoned the Isles, their legions faded a generation ago, leaving broken towns and old roads. In the West, in Wales and Cornwall, and across Celtic-speaking lands, the people fight to hold on to their homes. New invaders, the Anglo-Saxons, press in from the east. This is a world in turmoil, a patchwork of small kingdoms and warlords. It's here, around the early 500s AD, that some scattered sources hint at a real-life Arthur. And the old chronicles do not give us a polished king in shining armor. They speak of a war leader. One Latin chronicle, the Historia Britanniae, or History of the Britons, compiled around 829 AD, describes Arthur not as a crowned king, but as Dux Bellorum, or a leader of battles, who fought alongside the kings of Britons against the Saxons. It lists 12 great battles that he won, culminating in a mighty victory at Mons Badonicus, or Mount Badon. In that battle, real-life war leader Arthur is said to have halted the Saxon advance in its tracks. Imagine him not in royal robes, but in a warlord's cloak, rallying Brittonic warriors on a wind-swept hilltop. Still an epic image, if you ask me. And we hear of Arthur's last battle as well from these early records. The Annals Cambriae, or Welsh Annals, compiled in the 900s, give a stark entry for the year around 537 AD. The Battle of Camlan, in which Arthur and Medrawt fell. Now that sounds familiar. No mention of glorious Avalon, however, just an end on a battlefield, 2 adversaries left dead. If Arthur had been like any other man, this would have been the end. This would have been his fate. But even then, something more clung to his memory. Something that made him different from any other fallen warlord. Soon after the adversaries had their epic battle on a hill, we find Arthur taking on a life in storytelling and poetry. He was inspirational. In the centuries after Arthur's supposed death, his name had become a symbol. In an early medieval Welsh poem that's attributed to Aneurin, a warrior is bravely praised by comparing him to Arthur, implying that Arthur was the paragon of warriors. This poem, though set in 6th century events, survived in a 13th century manuscript. So what I'm saying is, we have an early poem that was edited and written multiple times to include Arthur in different ways. By 800 AD or so, Arthur was legendary. He had become the yardstick of valor. And then, of course, there were the stories. Fragments of old Welsh poetry and tales portray Arthur not as a king on a throne, but as a wandering hero, a leader of a band of mighty men. There's a tantalizing poem called "What Man is the Gatekeeper?" in the Black Book of Carmarthen, where Arthur, traveling with his companions, Cal and Bedivere, encounter a gatekeeper and must recount his deeds to gain entry. In it, Arthur name drops his comrades and adventures, exploits that you only get to glimpse. So, this real-life, very early war hero named Arthur becomes the very epitome of what we consider honorable, strong, powerful, and, like I mentioned, the measure of what true valor looks like. And he inspires folks so much that by just a few hundred years later, we have a whole folkloric cycle of stories around him and his marvelous feats. Damn near like Hercules, but not as terrible. Because Hercules was kind of terrible. But, anyways, one of those stories, the Welsh story, Colach and Owen, likely written down around the 11th century, was drawing on older oral traditions, and it features Arthur as a heroic leader of a wild hunt for a magic boar. And in this tale, we see Arthur become royalty. This is one of our earliest tales of Arthur becoming kingly. But in this story, he's not a king yet. He's a prince. And he is the chief prince of Britain. And his knights and many others accompany him on his series of impossibly difficult tasks. Arthur in Welsh legend is a figure moving through a mythic landscape. He fights witches, he hunts monsters, he undertakes challenges set by giants, and various otherworldly powers. There is humor and there is wonder in these folktales, and a deep sense that Arthur is more than a man. He's a larger-than-life protector and leader in the old style of bardic heroes. One haunting snippet from Welsh poetry declares, "A wonder until Judgment Day is the grave of Arthur." In Welsh, it is recorded that Arthur's grave is a mystery, the world's wonder, a grave for Arthur, because no one knows where it is. This line, preserved in the Black Book of Carmarthen, tells us that to the Welsh, Arthur was never confirmed dead. His final resting place was the great unknown. Perhaps because he wasn't resting at all. The idea that Arthur never truly died, that he would one day return, took root early. As one Norman writer in the 1100s noted, with some amazement, mind you, quote, "The tomb of Arthur is nowhere to be seen, whence antiquity of fable still claims that he will return." End quote. Arthur became the once and future king. In the dark centuries after Rome, when the Britons faced wave after wave of invaders, the hope arose that Arthur was not gone for good. Someday, at Britain's direst hour, he would ride back from the mists of Avalon or from a hidden cave to save his people. In medieval Wales, this hope was more than a fancy. It was political. Political inspiration, but still political. The prophecies of Welsh bards often hinted that heroes like Arthur or others would return to liberate the land. So, how did we get from that early Arthur, the soldier, the folkloric hero, to the noble king of Camelot, with Lancelot and the Holy Grail? Well, this answer lies in the medieval imagination. In the 12th century, as Wales fought the encroaching Normans, Arthur's legend found new soil in the courts of Norman and French storytellers. Geoffrey of Monmouth wrote a fantastical history of the kings of Britain that for the first time gave a full biography of Arthur, blending some Welsh traditions with a lot of creative invention. So this false biography was written where we get a full fictional layout of Arthur. Geoffrey's Arthur was a great king who was crowned by a bishop, who then unites all of Britain and defeats the Saxons in battle after battle, then conquers Ireland, Iceland, Gaul, and beyond. In Geoffrey's tale, Arthur embellishes a glittering court at Caerleon, which is on the River Usk in South Wales, and enjoys a time of peace and plenty. Geoffrey also gives us Arthur's famous ending. He writes that Arthur was mortally wounded in the final battle against Medrod and was carried off to the Isle of Avalon to be healed of his wounds. That image of Avalon, likely drawn from older Celtic ideas of a magical island of apples, among other things, captured the medieval imagination across Europe. Now, this was an embellished story that mingled the traditions and beliefs of his time and his station into what was most certainly alive and vibrant living tradition of oral storytelling and oral tradition. And his work spread like wildfire. It was translated, retold, and embellished in Latin, French, English, and other languages too. Poets in the courts of France added their own creative flourishes. Particularly a Norman poet named Wace, which is kind of a cool name, introduced the concept of the Round Table. A French poet introduced Sir Lancelot and the tragic love affair with Guinevere, and he also began the story of the Holy Grail, transforming the Arthurian tales forever. One by one, new knights and ladies stepped into the story. Galahad, the purest of the knights, Percival, Tristan and Isolde. the Enchantress Morgan Le Fay, and so many more. By the time Sir Thomas Malory compiled Les Morts d'Arthur in 1485, the story had become an epic tapestry, one of the richest romantic cycles of all time, as scholars would say, with threads from Wales, England, France, and beyond woven together. Yet, at the core of this ever-expanding legend, the Welsh threads still hold the pattern. Arthur reimagined, in essence, the great defender, the ideal leader. To the world, he became a symbol of chivalry, but to the Celtic people, he never ceased to be one of their own. A son of Wales, of Britain, whose story held their history and their dreams. The Normans and later the English also claimed Arthur. Even King Edward I of England made a point of leveraging the Arthur legend. In 1191, monks at Glastonbury Abbey conveniently announced that they had discovered King Arthur's tomb, producing bones and an inscribed cross to prove that Arthur and Guinevere were buried there. Many believe this was a hoax aimed at undercutting Welsh hopes, for if Arthur's grave is found and he's proven dead, one can never expect his return. Nonetheless, among the Welsh, the old belief persisted that Arthur had no known grave and that he would return. He became a vessel into which each culture poured its yearnings, the cultural memory of anchor of a proud past and a beacon of a better future. In times of trouble, people invoked Arthur's name as a rallying cry or as a symbol of rightful sovereignty. This mythic dimension of Arthur as the sleeping guardian and the once and future king is as important as any historical Arthur could ever be. It means that Arthur lives not just in the records or chronicles, but in the hearts of the people. What also makes Arthur fascinating is how he straddles the line between myth and history, between his world and the other world. He is a hero in our tangible world, rallying troops, building a kingdom, yet so many of his greatest feats depend on magic, supernatural aid, on treasures, on weapons that are from beyond the mortal realm. In Celtic tradition, to be a king, you weren't just a political figure, but you were a sacral figure, a sovereignty figure whose authority came from divine or mystical sources. A king's right to rule was bound up with the land's prosperity and the favor of unseen powers. We see hints of this in Arthur's tales. The classic image of the Lady of the Lake extending Arthur the sword of Excalibur is a powerful symbol of sovereignty bestowed by the other world. The sword is a symbol of kingship and power, and it isn't drawn from stone by brute strength alone. In some versions, it's given by a spirit of the lake, meaning Arthur's legitimacy comes from the spiritual realm, from Anwen in Welsh terms. Arthur's downfall, likewise, is often accompanied by the land's desolation. Like in later versions of the legend that contain the Holy Grail, the wasteland is often linked to the wounded king. Arthur is the hope carrier for his people, and as long as Arthur lives, or even might live, the hope of the Celtic Isles lives. And when he falls, something in the spirit of the land falls too, until that hope is rekindled by the idea that he will return. So who is King Arthur? He's a kaleidoscope of identities. A probable 6th century Brittonic warlord holding back the darkness after Rome's fall. A legendary hero of Welsh poetry, brave and flawed, wandering the forests and otherworldly realms. A mighty emperor king of medieval romance. And, just and true, surrounded by knights in shining armor and a timeless symbol of the soul of Britain. Especially of the Welsh spirit that has kept these stories alive. Above all, King Arthur is a story. A story carried like glowing coals from generation to generation, banked in the ashes during the long nights of conquest and oppression, and then flaring up to warm the hearts of people who needed to remember that true leadership and honor and unity once walked in this land hand in hand, and that they can come again. The story of King Arthur started as a very real person with very real impressive feats, who inspired the bards of the time to sing, write, and dance his stories again and again and again, adding in more and more and more as time went on. Then conquest came, and culture was shared, and Arthur's story grew even more, and has continued to do so up until our modern day. And because of that, our journey with Arthur is just beginning. In our very first episode, we're going to paint these broad strokes of this saga. Things you might find in a storybook or hear by the fireside anywhere in the world. Now that you've heard that, we'll begin to explore a little bit deeper. When we return to this story, to the land of Wales, to its hills and lakes and ruins, to its oldest verses and tales, we will be seeking the truth behind this legend, or at least the meaning behind it. Arthur may be global now, but his roots drink from Welsh soil. In the next chapter of our journey, we're going to slip further into the mists, following Arthur not in the daylight of history, but in the twilight realms that lie underneath the surface of his story. So prepare to venture with me to the mystical side of Arthurian tradition, to the enchanted otherworld from which kingship, strength, and healing flow. For now, our fire is burning low and the night grows deep. As we bank the coals and prepare to sleep, listen just beyond the edge of your hearing. Is that the sound of 9 maidens singing from across the water? Or the whisper of an old spell? That might be the magic of Arthur's world calling you. And next time, we're going to answer. Until then, remember that the story of Arthur is alive in the land, in the wind, and in us who remember him. So, Nosta, good night, and dream of kings and dragons. My name is Wishamaya. Don't forget to keep your roots deep and your dreams wild.